everybody. Welcome to part 2 of the Chapter 1 lecture series. And in this part, we're going to be looking at the expansion of Europe and European colonization of the Americas. Now, the first focus question I want you guys to think about is what impelled European explorers to look west across the Atlantic? Now, before we really get into the main era of exploration, or age of discovery, if you will, we have to go back a little bit further to early colonialism, particularly the Viking explorers that set out from Scandinavia, and more specifically Iceland and Greenland, about the year 1000 CE. The Vikings reached Newfoundland, which they refer to as Vinland, about 1000 CE. These voyages were led by Leif Erikson, and they established a community known as L'Anse aux Meadows, which you can see a photograph of a reconstruction of it that archaeologists have put together right here. Now, this settlement did not last that long, only a few years, and conflicts with natives and an unwillingness or inability to adapt to their new environment, to local food, and to local technologies doomed these Norse settlers. Now, of course, while they did arrive here that early, the knowledge of their discovery didn't really spread in Europe at the time. So, needless to say, most Europeans had no clue that any sort of new land had been discovered, and the Vikings themselves didn't really realize exactly where they had ended up. In the last video, we discussed the effect of the Little Ice Age in the Americas, and here it's important to provide a little bit of context as to exactly what effect this Little Ice Age had in Europe. Now, the Little Ice Age in Europe began approximately 1315 CE, and the much colder weather that resulted from this Little Ice Age led to much poorer harvests, which led to a population decline in Europe. Now, this was exacerbated by the spread of the bubonic plague in Europe, which began around 1352 CE. And this bubonic plague decimated European populations that was already suffering from a decline as a result of the Little Ice Age. Now, this led to a fall of the feudal society, which was the basis for the economic, social, and political lives of Europeans at the time. Now, the population decline that resulted from the Little Ice Age and the bubonic plague led to labor becoming even more valuable. It gathered a premium, if you will, at the time, as the reduction in the number of peasants led to those peasants having a little bit more power in negotiating with their lords over access to resources and access to such things as wages and things of that nature. Also, this large effect also led to migration to cities as people sought new economic opportunities resulting from these rapid changes. Now, as a result, those local lords that ran those manors, which were the foundation for the economic, social, and political lives of feudal society, began to lose more and more power. And as those local lords lost power, you saw the emergence of more centralized monarchies and the development of the age of the absolute monarch that I'm sure many of you are familiar with from some of your previous studies of history. Now, the emergence of these more centralized monarchs also created a new sense of national identity, whereas before people had associated their identity more with their local region or their local manor or their local lord or their, language or culture or something like that. During this time, people began to identify more and more with their nation that was represented from these, or by these more centralized monarchies. So people began to identify more as French or English or Spanish or things of that nature. And this led to an increased competition for resources, access to trade, and power and influence among these new, more powerful monarchies in Europe. Now, advancing technology, the development of these more centralized governments, which resulted in ever-increasing political rivalries as these governments competed for resources and population, a desire to spread Christianity, and conflicts with Muslim Middle Eastern powers led Western Europeans to seek new trade routes in the late 15th century. Some of these new technological developments, including the astrolabe, which is represented here, which was a very, very advanced navigational device that really led to the ability of Europeans to spread further out on the oceans. Of course, the printing press and the rapid increase in the speed of communication that resulted from the printing press also had a profound effect. And of course, the development of gunpowder and firearms led to even more destructive conflicts and rivalries at the time. Now, Portugal and Spain were the first to seek trade routes that bypassed the Muslim control of the land-based routes that had previously dominated global trade, or especially the trade between Europe and Asia. And the Reconquista helped to create a centralized monarchy in Spain. Now, prior to the Reconquista, much of Spain was actually controlled by Muslim powers. But spearheaded by Isabella of Castile and her husband Ferdinand of Aragon, the Spanish kingdoms began to consolidate and push back the Muslim presence in that Iberian peninsula. Now, when they finally defeated the last Muslim enclave of Granada in 1492 and consolidated their control of much of the Iberian Peninsula, creating the new kingdom or nation of Spain, they rewarded those that fought for the Spanish against the Muslims with what were known as the encomienda. Now, this was not actually a grant of land, but rather it was a grant to the rights to the labor of the conquered peoples in those regions, to those that fought with the Spanish. And this particularly provided a basis for and a model to follow for when the Spanish expanded into the New World. 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, a rhyme that I'm sure many of you are familiar with going back to probably your elementary school days. Columbus himself was actually Genoese. Genoa was an Italian city-state that had a very powerful maritime presence in the Mediterranean and in the Atlantic, and Genoese mariners were prominent across Europe, actually. And Christopher Columbus himself was widely traveled. He had spent lots of time in the Mediterranean, in the Atlantic, along the coast of Africa, and he was well studied in geography. Now, contrary to popular belief, most people in Europe at the time did not believe the earth was flat. They knew the earth was round. And, however, the new science that was emerging at the time said that the earth was small enough to reach Asia sailing east. Now remember, they had no idea there were two giant land masses that would become known as North and South America between Europe and Asia at the time. So Columbus thought that he could leave Europe, sail west across the Atlantic, and in a few short months at the most end up on the coast of Asia, and thus bypassing not only the land routes that had previously been the focus of European and Asian trade, but also the other ocean routes that had developed late in the 15th century, as particularly Portugal discovered a way around the southern coast of Africa into the Indian Ocean. Now, Columbus made landfall in the Caribbean in October of 1492. It's thought that he landed in a place known as San Salvador, which is somewhere in the Bahamas around here. And he also discovered the island of Hispaniola, which is currently divided between Haiti and the Dominican Republic. He met the Taino people, which were the natives of the area. Now, he did believe that he had indeed reached Asia, particularly somewhere around the coast of India. Thus, he referred to the residents as the Indians, and the name stuck. Now, Columbus believed that he had reached Asia pretty much till the day he died. It wasn't until another Italian explorer named Amerigo Vespucci actually sailed along the coast of South America, and he actually also eventually explored some of the eastern part of North America and realized that it was an entirely new continent, or actually two entirely new continents. And that is where we get the name of America from Amerigo Vespucci. Now, European colonization began in earnest actually after Columbus's second voyage, which occurred in 1493, where he established some settlements on the island of Hispaniola and later on in Cuba as well. That's the end of part 2 of our Chapter 1 lecture series. Look forward to part 3 very soon. In the meantime, study hard, and I'll see you soon.